"Get this man out of here. This bank is not for your kind." The words cracked through the lobby like a whip, sharp and deliberate. They did not slip out in anger. They were delivered like policy, loud enough for every customer in First USA Bank to hear. The manager's face was red with authority, his hand holding $1 million check over a flame, daring it to turn to ash. Phones tilted upward, heads turned. And just like that, what should have been a simple transaction became a public execution of dignity. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we are glad you are here. Now, back to the man in the gray hoodie. He stood still at the counter, a black man in plain clothes, gray hoodie and dark jeans, arms pinned by a security guard's grip. He did not shout. He did not struggle. He just breathed, steady and measured, as though he had already predicted every insult that now filled the marble air. His silence was not weakness. It was patience, sharpened by years of hearing the same words in different rooms. The manager leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "Fake checks again. That is all you people ever bring in here." The insult was not whispered. It was thrown into the room like gasoline. Customers shifted uneasily. Some shook their heads. Others pulled out phones and hit record. A woman near the line covered her mouth. "He showed his ID," she whispered to the man beside her. "That looked real." He frowned, tapping his phone to record. "Does not matter to them. They already decided." The check's edge curled and blackened, smoke twisting upward toward the chandeliers. The manager's voice boomed again, fueled by his own performance. "We protect this institution. We do not let fraudsters dressed like that walk in and pretend they belong." His hand trembled with the lighter, but his arrogance made it look like theater. Through it all, the man in the hoodie never blinked. He watched the paper burn, not with fear, but with calculation. Every second of silence was a test. Every insult was evidence. He remembered being 22, sitting across from a loan officer who had called him high risk even with collateral stacked on the desk. He remembered being told at 26 that he looked more like a janitor than a client when he tried to deposit his first commission check. And now, years later, after billions in acquisitions and boardroom victories, here he stood again. Different place, same prejudice. The security guard's grip tightened, jaw set as though restraining a threat. But the only threat in the room was the truth. The manager turned to him and barked, "Escort this man outside. We are done here." The guard nodded stiffly, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. He had seen the ID, he had seen the account number, and he had heard the whispers starting to ripple across the lobby. "Why would he come here with a fake check that large?" one man muttered. "That is not how scammers move," another said quietly, phone raised higher. The lobby's atmosphere shifted. What had been private humiliation was becoming public theater. The audience was no longer silent. And the man at the center of it all, calm, restrained, unshaken, was not the fraud they imagined. He was the storm about to turn the room upside down. The manager smirked, shaking the half-burnt check, ash falling onto the marble counter. "See? Nothing left. Just like his story. Nothing." But the fire he thought would erase the truth was about to ignite something far bigger than he could contain. The question was no longer whether the man in the hoodie belonged. The question was how long until the bank itself realized who truly owned the ground they were standing on. The flame finally died, leaving only a curl of smoke and the charred edge of paper scattered on the marble counter. The manager dropped the blackened scrap as if it proved his point, his voice rising again. "This institution is not a playground. We will not be conned by someone walking in here dressed like that." His words were sharp, designed to cut deeper than the fire ever could. The man in the gray hoodie did not move. His silence filled the lobby in a way shouting never could. Customers shifted, the weight of the insult pressing on everyone who heard it. A mother holding her young daughter pulled her child closer and whispered, "This is wrong." A man in a tailored suit leaned against the wall, his phone angled just enough to capture everything. The red light glowed, a quiet witness no one could silence. The security guard's grip tightened again. His badge gleamed under the lights, but his hesitation was clear. He had seen the identification card. He had glanced at the account number before the manager snatched it away. Something about this did not feel like fraud. It felt like something uglier. Still, he held on. Orders were orders. Across the counter, a young teller with nervous eyes finally spoke up, her voice low but cutting through the noise. "Sir, His information matched in the system. She looked at the manager, then back at the man in the hoodie. It was valid. The manager snapped his head toward her, face hardening. Do not undermine this branch. I said it was fraudulent, and that is final. His tone silenced her instantly. She stepped back, lips pressed tight, but her eyes said more than her words ever could. Whispers grew louder. He showed everything. That was a real check. Why are they treating him like this? The lobby was no longer neutral ground. It was becoming a stage, and every witness was now an audience member forced to choose a side. The man in the hoodie finally lifted his gaze, locking eyes with the manager. His voice was calm, steady, and deliberate. You burned proof, not fraud, and you just proved more about yourself than about me. The words were not shouted, but they landed heavy in the room. The manager smirked, brushing ash off his fingers. You are finished here. Security, take him out now. Ugh. The guard shifted uneasily, the command hanging in the air. Around them, phones kept recording. The tension thickened, not with chaos, but with anticipation. Everyone knew something was about to break. And the man in the gray hoodie, standing tall and silent in the center of it all, seemed to know it better than anyone else. The guard's hand pressed harder against the man's arm, but the weight of his hesitation was obvious. He looked to the manager for reassurance, but what he saw instead was arrogance dressed as authority. The manager straightened his tie and sneered. You people always try the same trick. Walk in with forged paper. Hope someone will not check. That does not work here. The words spread through the room like static. Several customers flinched, not because they were surprised, but because they had heard that phrase before. A middle-aged man at the back muttered, Same trick? He handed you proper identification. You burned it before anyone could even review it. His voice carried across the lobby. Others nodded, emboldened by his defiance. Near the teller line, a college-aged woman raised her phone higher and said, This is not fraud. This is profiling. Her tone cracked with disbelief, but her recording kept steady. Every second was being captured, time-stamped, and broadcast silently to an audience far beyond the marble walls of that branch. The man in the hoodie still had not raised his voice. He stood calm, composed, as if every insult was being catalogued in his mind like evidence. His stillness unsettled the staff more than any outburst could. He did not look cornered, he looked anchored. The manager slammed a palm on the counter, ash scattering again. Do not let him fool you. He does not belong in this space. This is a bank for real clients. His eyes darted across the crowd, searching for support, but what met him was doubt. Even the guard's grip loosened slightly. From the far corner, a teenager whispered to his mother, If he does not belong, then why was his name in the system? The mother shook her head, whispering back, Because belonging is not about the system. It is about who they choose to see. Yeah. The silence after that exchange was louder than any accusation. The man in the hoodie finally shifted, his voice quiet but cutting through the charged air. You are not protecting the institution. You are exposing it. The manager's lips curled into a smirk, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. He gestured at the guard again. Remove him now. Yet before the guard could move, another voice rang out. It was the young teller, trembling but resolute. His account matched. I saw it. You cannot erase that. The lobby froze. A gasp rippled through the witnesses. For the first time, someone inside the bank had broken ranks. The manager snapped, You are out of line. But it was too late. The tide had shifted. Cameras caught every word, every twitch of power unraveling. The man in the gray hoodie did not move. He only breathed, steady and certain, as though he knew exactly what came next. The storm was gathering, and the branch was no longer under the manager's control. It was under the weight of truth pressing in from all sides. The lobby held its breath. The guard's fingers slackened, his grip no longer a restraint but a question. The manager's jaw tightened as he felt the ground shift beneath him. He slammed the counter again and barked, Enough! You are all being manipulated. This man is nothing but a fraud. The young teller flinched, but she did not retreat. Her voice, fragile but unbroken, echoed again. I checked his information. It matched. She looked around the lobby, her words finding courage in the faces that were now staring back at her. He is not lying. A murmur rolled through the crowd like a wave. Phones angled higher, red recording lights multiplying. A businessman near the glass doors said aloud, If she confirmed it, then why burn the check? His tone carried suspicion, the kind that sticks and spreads. The man in the gray hoodie stood perfectly still. His silence was deliberate, each second of composure heavier than the last. He had no need to argue. The room itself was beginning to speak for him. The manager's face darkened. Do not let one junior employee undo protocol. I said it is fraud. That means it is fraud. His words cracked with desperation, not authority. His gaze darted toward security again, demanding compliance. Escort him out now. The guard shifted uncomfortably. He looked at the manager, then at the man in the hoodie, then at the crowd with their phones raised like an unblinking jury. Finally, he muttered, Sir, he has not resisted. He has not done anything. The manager snapped back. He does not belong here. That is enough. The phrase landed like poison. Gasps followed. A woman near the entrance raised her phone higher. Say it again, she called out, her voice sharp with disbelief. Say he does not belong. The manager's face flushed red, but his arrogance refused to bend. This is a private institution. We choose who qualifies as a client. His words hung in the air, heavy, unmistakable. The man in the hoodie finally lifted his head. His eyes were steady, his tone calm, each word like a nail driven into the marble silence. Belonging is not yours to grant. It is mine to prove, and I have already proven it. The crowd stirred, murmurs rising into open protest. He showed ID. He had the account. This is wrong. The lobby was no longer a neutral space. It was a stage, and the manager was losing his audience. The man did not move an inch. He did not need to. His stillness was louder than shouting. The tension tightened, a coil ready to snap. The bank was about to find out that silence, when wielded by the right person, is the most dangerous weapon of all. The tension in the lobby thickened until it felt like the marble walls themselves were holding their breath. Every phone was raised now, every eye fixed on the confrontation that had turned an ordinary morning into a trial staged for the world. From the far corner, a customer in his 30s whispered into his camera, "This is discrimination, plain and simple." He gave them everything, and they still called him a fraud. His voice cracked, but he did not lower the phone. Behind him, an older woman clutched her handbag and said softly to no one in particular, "I have seen this before." Different faces, same treatment. The man in the gray hoodie remained steady, shoulders squared, gaze unbroken. His silence was no longer just composure. It was defiance, a refusal to give the manager the chaos he craved. That stillness unsettled the staff more than shouting ever could. The manager leaned over the counter, pointing at him as if pressing a gavel. "Security, this is your last warning. Remove him now, or you will both regret it." His words echoed across the lobby, but the authority in his voice was crumbling. The guard's eyes shifted to the crowd, then back to the man he held. The doubt was clear. Then, from the side of the lobby, another employee stepped forward. She was young, barely out of training, her uniform crisp, but her hands trembling. Her voice broke the silence. "I saw his account in the system this morning. His balance is real. His ID is real. This is not fraud." The lobby gasped. For the second time, someone inside the bank had spoken up. Customers turned their cameras toward her, capturing every word. The manager's face twisted in rage. "You are finished here," he spat. "You will not undermine me in front of strangers." The employee did not back down. Her voice wavered, but her stance was firm. "The truth is not undermining. It is the job." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some clapped softly. Others shouted, "Listen to her." The energy had shifted, and it was no longer under the manager's control. The man in the hoodie finally broke his silence. His words were calm but carried weight like stone. "You burned my proof. You silenced your own staff. And yet the truth stands here anyway." He paused, letting the moment stretch, his gaze sweeping the room. "The question is not if I belong. The question is why you think you have the right to decide." The room fell quiet again, but it was not the quiet of agreement. It was the quiet of reckoning. The manager's authority was shrinking with every second, while the man in the hoodie had not moved a single step. Phones recorded, hearts raced, and everyone knew that something irreversible had already begun. The bank was no longer just a place of business. It had become a courtroom, and the verdict was turning against the man who thought he owned the gavel. The lobby was no longer still. The air hummed with unease, the sound of whispered outrage spreading like wildfire. Customers leaned into their phones, narrating what they saw, their words carried live into feeds that would outlast the marble columns and chandeliers. The manager straightened, face flushed with a desperate kind of pride. "Enough!" he barked, his voice cracking under its own weight. "This man is trespassing. He is a fraud. He is not a client and never will be. We protect this bank from people like him." That sentence landed like a stone dropped in water. Ripples of shock moved through the crowd. A man in a suit near the espresso counter spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "You do not protect the bank. You disgrace it." His words drew murmurs of agreement, nods from strangers who had walked in to deposit checks and were now witnesses to something far heavier. The man in the gray hoodie did not flinch. He stood rooted, calm, while the weight of accusation piled higher. His silence no longer felt passive. It was a mirror, reflecting every cruel word back onto the one who spoke it. The security guard's posture sagged. He still held the man's arm, but there was no strength in it. He looked at the manager, then at the crowd. Phones were aimed like weapons. Every second of this would live online, a record that could not be erased. "Do your job," the manager hissed. "Drag him out before the police arrive." The guard hesitated. Then quietly he said, "Sir, he has done nothing wrong." His words were low but audible. The room reacted instantly. Gasps, applause. A customer shouted, "Finally, someone telling the truth." The manager's eyes widened in fury. He slammed his fist against the counter. "Do not defy me. You are paid to obey orders, not question them." But the tide was against him. Another employee stepped forward from the back office, her face pale but determined. "He is in the system," she said clearly. "I checked it myself. His account is real. You know it, Island." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. The manager's mouth opened, then closed. His authority was collapsing, piece by piece, and the weight of witnesses made every denial sound hollow. Finally, the man in the hoodie spoke again, his voice low but resonant. "You said I do not belong. You said I am not a client. But the truth is this. I walked in here with proof, and you chose to burn it. You wanted humiliation, not justice." The words hung in the air like a verdict. The crowd's murmurs turned into open declarations. "He is right. We saw it. This is discrimination." The bank was no longer on the manager's side. The room had shifted. The walls themselves seemed to lean toward truth, and the man in the hoodie stood taller than ever, without moving a single step. The storm had arrived, and it was only getting stronger. The moment the words, "people like him," echoed off the marble walls, something inside the lobby snapped. The crowd that had been murmuring in disbelief now shifted into open outrage. Phones tilted higher, voices rose louder, and the atmosphere swelled into a chorus of indignation. A woman in a red blazer stepped forward from the teller line, pointing straight at the manager. "We all heard you. You did not say fraud. You said people like him. That is not policy. That is prejudice." Her voice rang out, steady and furious, drawing applause from scattered corners of the lobby. The manager's face burned crimson. He jabbed a finger at her. "Stay out of this. You are a customer, not a judge. I run this branch, and I will decide who stays and who goes." But his words only deepened the fracture. A young father holding a toddler shook his head. "You do not run anything. We are watching you destroy your own institution." His child squirmed in his arms, eyes wide at the tension filling the air. The security guard stepped back, releasing his grip from the man in the gray hoodie altogether. He raised both hands slightly, as if surrendering to the truth. "I will not drag him out. He has not broken a single rule." The crowd erupted, applause, shouts, and the sound of dozens of recordings overlapping into a storm of testimony. The manager, desperate, grabbed the remains of the burned check from the counter and waved the ash like proof. "Look at this. This is all the evidence you need. He brought in garbage and expected us to cash it." The man in the hoodie finally moved, not with aggression but with calm precision. He lifted his chin, his voice cutting through the chaos like steel. "You destroyed evidence that proved my name, my account, and my balance. You did it not because it was fake, but because you could not accept who it belonged to." The silence that followed was electric. The accusation was undeniable, and it laid bare the truth everyone had witnessed. The crowd leaned in, phones recording every syllable. Then the manager made his final mistake. He pointed to the man in the hoodie and bellowed, "He is trespassing. Call the police immediately. Tell them we have a dangerous fraud in progress." His voice cracked, but his intent was sharp. The words landed heavy. Dangerous. Fraud. In progress. The escalation was not just professional, it was criminal. Gasps filled the air. A young woman near the entrance shouted, "You just lied to the police. That is a false report." Others nodded, voices overlapping. "That is a crime. We saw everything." The man in the hoodie did not flinch. He stood anchored, his hands visible, his posture calm. His silence was no longer just defiance. It was the unshakable calm of someone who knew the truth was about to arrive like a hammer. The crowd was no longer just watching. They were witnesses, and the bank lobby was no longer a place of business. It had become a stage for justice, and the curtain was rising higher with every passing second. The call to the police sent a chill through the lobby. The manager's voice had been loud enough for every witness to hear, and the weight of those words poisoned the air. Dangerous. Fraud. In progress. He wanted the label to stick before the truth could surface. But the man in the gray hoodie did not move. He reached calmly into his pocket, every gesture deliberate, every second heavy with control. The crowd stiffened, then exhaled when he pulled out nothing but a sleek black phone. He pressed one button, lifted it to his ear, and spoke with the calm precision of someone who had been here before. "Carla," he said evenly, his voice steady but sharp, "activate protocol. Log every word. Notify the board." On the other end, a female voice responded instantly, crisp and unshaken. "Already live. Recording has begun. Corporate ethics team is monitoring in real time." The lobby shifted. Phones lowered slightly as customers realized what they had just heard. This was not the voice of a man caught off guard. This was the voice of someone who had prepared for exactly this moment. The manager scoffed, his laugh bitter and thin. "A phone call will not save you. You can play pretend all you want, but once the police arrive, you will be escorted out in handcuffs." He smirked at the crowd, as though daring them to doubt him. "No board cares about a fraud." The man in the hoodie did not break his gaze. "You just made a false report on a client in good standing. Every second of it is documented, and now every word you speak is part of the record." A ripple of energy passed through the crowd. A man in a suit near the doors whispered, "He is not bluffing." A teenager holding up her phone muttered, "Who calls a board if they are nobody?" The manager turned red. He pointed again, his voice trembling with anger. "He is nothing. He does not belong here. He is stalling." The security guard, who had stepped away minutes earlier, shook his head. His voice carried louder this time. "No, he is not stalling. He is standing." The crowd responded with applause. A customer shouted, "Let him speak!" Another added, "We all saw what happened." "You burned his check." The man in the hoodie lowered his phone slightly, his voice calm but cutting. "You wanted me silent. You wanted me erased. Instead, you will be heard louder than you ever imagined." He lifted the phone again. "Carla, escalate the report. Ensure law enforcement receives the recording before they arrive." "Confirmed," Carla replied. "The system has already flagged the false statement. The branch manager's exact words have been logged and submitted to compliance." The lobby buzzed with disbelief and anticipation. Customers exchanged looks, realizing the balance of power was shifting. The manager's smirk faltered. For the first time, his confidence cracked. He looked around the room, but no one was with him anymore. Not the employees, not the guard, not the crowd. He was standing alone, while the man he had called a fraud stood anchored, his calm more powerful than any shouting could ever be. The storm had broken open, and the first strike of lightning had already landed. The crowd leaned in, the silence before the next moment pressing on every chest in the lobby. The man in the gray hoodie lowered his phone, his gaze steady, his voice carrying like a blade through the charged air. "You burned a check worth more than your annual salary," he said calmly. "You called me a fraud in front of witnesses, and now you are about to learn who you just tried to erase." Gasps rippled across the marble floor. Phones tilted higher. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "What does he mean?" The mother answered softly, her eyes never leaving the man. "It means this story is not what we thought." The manager tried to laugh, but it came out brittle, false. "You think a speech changes anything? You are still nothing here. You are trespassing, and you will be removed." His eyes darted nervously at the guard, who stood rooted, unmoving. The man in the hoodie did not blink. He placed his phone flat on the counter, screen lit and glowing with a secure channel already in session. His next words were measured, deliberate. "I am not trespassing. I am the majority shareholder of First USA Bank. This institution exists because of me." The lobby froze. 1,000 unspoken thoughts collided in the air. For a moment, even the phone's recording seemed to pause. The declaration was too big, too heavy, too unexpected. The young teller who had spoken earlier gasped out loud, her voice breaking the silence. "Shareholder?" Her eyes widened as she realized the truth. "You are the owner?" The man nodded once, not with arrogance, but with certainty. "Not just a client, not just a name in the system. I am the one who signs the contracts you follow. I am the one who built the foundation you are standing on." The manager staggered back a step. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His authority, once barked with such confidence, now lay shattered on the marble floor. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, others in disbelief. A man near the door shouted, "We knew it! That is why he stayed calm." Another customer raised her phone and said loudly, "The whole world is going to see this." The security guard dropped his hands entirely, shaking his head slowly. "You tried to throw out the owner," he said to the manager, his voice low but audible. "You burned his money in front of everyone." The manager's face drained of color. Sweat gathered at his temple. His mouth opened again, searching for a denial, but the words would not come. He had no defense left. The man in the hoodie stepped closer, his presence filling the space that arrogance had once occupied. "You thought silence meant weakness, but silence was patience, and patience has its limit." The lobby roared, voices rising into applause, gasps, and shouts. The truth had landed, and the room itself seemed to shift, no longer a stage for humiliation, but a tribunal delivering justice. The storm had revealed its center, and the manager now stood exposed in its path. The revelation cracked the lobby wide open. What had been whispers and doubt exploded into a storm of voices. Phones lifted higher, recording every stunned expression, every flinch of guilt. Guests clapped, some cheered, and others simply stared in shock at the manager who only moments earlier had spoken as though he were untouchable. The manager stumbled back, his confidence drained from his face. His voice trembled as he tried to recover. "That is not possible. You are lying. Someone like you cannot own this institution." But even as he spoke, the words rang hollow, brittle, already collapsing under the weight of truth. The young teller pressed a hand to her chest, eyes wide. "I saw his name," she whispered, louder than she intended. "It was in the system, flagged as executive-level clearance." Her words rippled through the crowd like a spark. The security guard stepped fully away from the man in the hoodie, his voice firm now. "He told you the truth, and we all saw what you did." His words carried authority, his tone no longer loyal to the manager, but to the truth standing before him. Customers erupted again, some shouting, "Shame!" while others chanted, "We saw it! We saw it!" The lobby transformed into a stage of accountability, and the manager, pale and trembling, stood trapped under the relentless gaze of dozens of witnesses. The man in the gray hoodie lifted his phone once more, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "Carla, confirm my shareholder status for this branch. Let the record show the manager attempted to expel an owner." A clear voice echoed from the device. "Confirmed. Shareholder status verified. Majority control documented." The crowd gasped, then applauded louder, the sound reverberating against marble and glass. The manager closed his eyes, face collapsing under the weight of a truth he could not outrun. The man in the hoodie took a single step forward, silence following in his wake. Every eye was locked on him now. Authority had shifted, control had shifted, and the lobby belonged to him. The marble lobby was alive with noise, but inside that noise there was order. It was the sound of justice turning. The manager, once puffed up with arrogance, now stood small and trembling. His hands shook as if the ash from the burned check still clung to his skin. The man in the gray hoodie spoke again, his voice calm but unyielding. "You accused me of fraud in front of witnesses. You ordered my removal. You burned a legitimate check. Those actions are violations, not only of trust but of law." The crowd roared in agreement. Someone shouted, "Fire him!" Another voice yelled, "Accountability!" The manager tried to regain control. "This is not how we conduct business. You cannot just walk in here and—" His words broke off when the man in the hoodie raised his hand. Silence fell like a gavel striking. "Effective immediately," the man said with authority. "Your employment is terminated. Your access to this branch, to its systems, and to its staff is revoked." He turned to his phone, speaking clearly. "Carla, initiate lockout protocol for branch manager Thomas Gray. Disable his credentials. Strip his authority. Document this incident for legal review. The voice on the phone responded without hesitation. Confirmed. Lockout in progress. System override initiated. A sharp electronic buzz filled the room. The manager's badge, clipped to his belt, blinked red. He pulled it out in disbelief, swiping it against the terminal at the side of the counter. Denied. Again denied, each rejection louder than any argument he could make. Gasps and cheers erupted from the crowd. A young man filming shouted, "It is happening live! He is locked out!" The security guard stepped forward, his posture straighter now. He addressed the man in the hoodie with respect. "What are your orders, sir?" The manager's mouth fell open. He spun toward the guard, fury mixed with fear. "You cannot do this. I am your superior." But the guard did not flinch. Not anymore. He islanded. The manager's knees buckled slightly. He looked around the room, searching for allies, but found none. The tellers would not meet his gaze. The customers openly glared. The witnesses kept recording. He was surrounded not by support, but by evidence. The man in the hoodie's eyes never wavered. "Escort him out," he commanded evenly. The guard nodded once and moved behind the manager. The manager resisted, sputtering, "This is not finished. You will regret this." But his protests were drowned by applause and shouts of triumph. Phones followed his every step as he was walked toward the door. For the first time, the manager looked small, stripped of his authority, reduced to the very thing he had tried to impose on another exile. The man in the hoodie remained steady, his silence more powerful than shouting. The verdict had been delivered. The punishment was already in motion. And the lobby, once charged with humiliation, now rang with the sound of justice served in real time. The glass doors of the bank closed behind the disgraced manager, and with that single motion, the atmosphere inside shifted entirely. The marble lobby, once poisoned by arrogance and prejudice, now hummed with something different vindication. Applause swelled until it echoed like thunder against the vaulted ceiling. Customers cheered. Some wiped tears. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The man in the gray hoodie remained still at the center, not basking in the moment, not seeking celebration. His calm was unbroken, his silence deliberate. When the crowd finally quieted, his voice filled the space with the weight of finality. "You called me a fraud in a bank I built. You tried to erase me with fire and humiliation, but dignity does not burn. It stands, it waits, and when the truth comes, it does not ask permission. It takes its place." The words cut deep, clean as a blade. Phones rose again, capturing every syllable. A woman near the counter whispered to her son, "Remember this, he never shouted once. That is real strength." The young teller who had spoken up earlier stepped forward, her voice trembling but proud. "Thank you," she said softly, "for showing us that silence can be power, not defeat." The man inclined his head slightly, acknowledgement without spectacle. He turned back to his phone, speaking with the same calm authority. "Carla, finalize the report. Note that corrective action was executed on site. Freeze the former manager's accounts and forward legal documentation to compliance." "Confirmed," Carla's voice replied, echoing through the speaker. "Action complete." The crowd erupted again, some clapping, some chanting, "Justice!" It was no longer just about a check or a branch manager. It was about something larger, the proof that power does not always need to raise its voice. The man in the hoodie finally addressed the lobby one last time. His tone was low, deliberate, every word sharpened to carry beyond the walls. "Do not mistake silence for surrender. Do not mistake patience for weakness. Today was not about me. It was about every person who has been told they do not belong. I did not need a camera to prove who I am. I am the result you cannot erase." For a moment, the lobby was utterly still. Then the applause rose again, louder than before, layered with cheers and tears and relief. Strangers who had never met stood shoulder to shoulder, united in the weight of what they had just seen. The man in the hoodie turned, walking calmly toward the exit. No entourage, no security detail, just steady steps across the marble floor. The crowd parted for him, not out of fear but out of respect. Phones kept filming, documenting the moment dignity walked through the doors of First USA Bank without raising its voice. Outside, the city continued as though nothing had happened. But inside the walls of that branch, the story had already become something far larger than the building itself. Justice had not shouted. It had spoken quietly, and it had won.